Who's really winning in the transfer portal?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Transfer portal. Who's winning? Who's losing? Why? Are you meeting your needs? Are you getting impact players? Are you spending too much? Not enough with NIL? And how about retaining your current roster while not ticking them off with how much money you're spending on portal guys? There's a lot of different ways to evaluate the transfer portal. And I want to talk about why Florida State, Wisconsin, Texas Tech, LSU, Indiana, some of these programs are doing some good things, but maybe they aren't doing as well as you might think in some areas and better in others. It's very, very difficult to decipher all this. I'm going to help break it down right here on Locked On Seminoles. Let's start off with the Noles as a history lesson. No team is a better one to use for any other program to look at for do's and don'ts. 2021 to 2023, Florida State found transfers in some way, shape, or form that helped their program more often than not. They were the best. Jared Verse and Fisk are probably the two that are talked about a lot because they've had so much success here recently playing for the Rams. But obviously, I mean, even Jordan Travis, well, he was a transfer himself before the portal. But you had guys like Keon Coleman that came over. Johnny Wilson came over. Jaheim Bell came over. Trey Benson came over. These guys were all transfers. Several different guys along the offensive line were transfers. Florida State made a living on it, but they got a little greedy. The 2024 team had several guys they had recruited out of high school, didn't win. They didn't have much success at their first school, and then they ended up transferring to Florida State. Not many of them have done great. Now, there's been a few exceptions there, and there's still some hope because several of them have eligibility left, but be careful, buyer beware. Production over high school ranking. That's what we've learned. And I'll get into that a little bit with Indiana. They've done a tremendous job with how they approach the 24 season by taking a lot of FCS guys or lower level players in the FBS that did well and moved into the Power Four very, very well for that team. So they won 11 games this year. But Florida State missed. They learned from their own mistakes. If you look at the 2025 Noles to date, they've got 4 offensive linemen, all out of the P4, and all starters, guys that are proven, not just high ranking. Some of them, like Adrian Medley, wasn't an elite recruit out of high school and he went to UCF, but he ended up being a starter there. He developed. He's got another year. Florida State will benefit. Micah Pettis was pretty highly ranked, but he started for 2 years at Ole Miss as well. Hanson, the left tackle at Vanderbilt, he started in the SEC at left tackle. You get the center from Wake Forest. He's a guy that played in the P4, changed in the line calls, etc. He played over 700 snaps 2 years in a row at Wake Forest. That is not easy to do. So Florida State's learned from its mistakes. They filled a need, got proven starters, got experience in a very, very bad circumstance. To get 4 this early, it's one of the greatest accomplishments in the portal over the last few years for any team. This is not something that most programs should use, though, because it's the exception, not the rule. Florida State's getting out of a hole a little quicker, in my opinion, than they probably should, because they have been abysmal at recruiting elite, not good, elite high school offensive line recruits. They're getting lucky, but this is not the best path. Texas Tech, for instance, a program that's doing really well in the portal. Got a few guys I'll talk about here in a second. They've signed 20-plus high school offensive linemen in their last 4 classes, really trying, but only a couple of them were 4 stars. If you take nothing else from this podcast, note the following. The portal can help you fill in a lot of holes. And again, Florida State's done a great job with the O-line this year in the portal. As a general rule, there is not a good way to win in college football without recruiting top-notch high school offensive linemen year after year after year after year. Only a handful of schools consistently do it. And that's why a lot of those programs are still in the college football playoff. Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Georgia. That's the easiest way to look at that. What separates some of these schools? Offensive line. Florida State's trying to get back on track, but eventually, as they noted, I'm sure that this is something Norvell and his staff have talked about internally, we have to do a much better job from the prep ranks. That being noted, Florida State's still winning because they got a quarterback that fits their offense. Thomas Castellanos will fit what Gus Malzahn wants to run in Tallahassee. They'll be pretty explosive. They've gotten some other good players on both sides of the ball. They got Williams, who I really like. Got McCray, the defensive lineman out of Western Kentucky. Again, production over high school ranking. Wasn't super highly ranked coming out of Jacksonville, but did well. Now, let's compare that in a sense to what Indiana did. And again, I think Indiana did an incredible job this past season. Signetti and his staff, they had 13 guys, if I remember correctly, from JMU. Among them, D'Angelo Pons, who ended up being an NFL corner. Elijah Sherratt, their best receiver, got a chance to make an NFL roster. Tyson Lawton, really good running back. James Carpenter, a quality defensive tackle. These are guys that some of them weren't elite recruits out of high school, but they figured it out. They knew the system, and they transferred to Indiana, plug and play. The exception to the rule, though, you're not going to get 13 kids very often. Indiana's going to drop off some next year. I know they got Mendoza, the Cal quarterback. He's a good football player. Florida State obviously went against them this past season, but you're now the hunted instead of the hunter too. That's something else for Indiana. And they didn't get enough impact guys yet, in my opinion, in the portal this year to really grade them overall. I just wanted to point out that their ability to evaluate the portal was similar to Norvell and Florida State, and they did a pretty good job with that. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about defense, how LSU has balanced things, and something I find really unique. Why, if I had to rank one team who has the best portal so far, I'd pick LSU. I'm going to explain that next here on Locked On Seminoles. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about and paid for more times than you'd like to count? Well, you'd probably be a lot like me because I've done this several times where I forgot about something. You're paying for it. It's on automatic, and that's money out of your pocket. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, spending habits, or even your goals that you want to hit this year. For me, one of the best things about it is the subscription tracker. What are you subscribing to and why? I've looked at this for a long time trying to figure it out. I go through my own bank statements. But Rocket Money does this for you. You can get your services canceled that you're not using anymore because it will remind you, and you can save a ton of money. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. LSU got Michael Van Buren, the backup quarterback. This is something that's very unique. They kept Garrett Nussmeier. He didn't go to the NFL, so I know they spent some money there. They had offensive line needs. Their stud left tackle is going to the draft. He's a dude. They've gotten a couple of really good players there. I don't know if you'll replace a first-round draft pick at tackle, but hear me out. And they've also found a way to get 3 receivers that are good. They found a deep. Wardaway knows LSU needed a defensive back that was good. They probably need 3 or 4, to be honest. We'll see how that goes. They also got 4 defensive linemen. Sadir Mitchell, 330, 340-pound guy, was at Texas. He was recruited by the Texas defensive line coach who's now at LSU. That's winning in the portal. And I'm just giving a nutshell because this is a Florida State pod, but that's an example of how you can do this. Somebody had asked, and I've even brought this up on the show, should Florida State find a backup now that Kromenhoek is gone? Because Thomas Castellanos got 1 year. That's a possibility. LSU is in a tremendous spot at quarterback. If you don't win a quarterback, you're not winning anywhere. regardless, it's portal, high school, JUCO, any way you look at it, you do not win at quarterback. You do not win on the field. Have to find a way to do that. It's something to think about. Well, here's another example. While Florida State kind of looks at its options, Wisconsin got Billy Edwards from Maryland, a veteran guy, pretty good player, but I don't know how good he really is because I don't have a lot of faith in that staff. They just never seem to get over the hump. And despite him being a team player, a guy that was pretty good, I don't think their offensive line was great. Wisconsin's will be better. But they also went out and they got a backup that's got some talent. That's a younger guy. Maybe they can develop him. This might be a trend. I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of names and stats. Let's see how many teams beyond LSU. I mean, Michael Van Buren was the starter at Mississippi State as a true freshman. For LSU to get him, knowing that Nussmeier was coming back, is a coup. He'll know the system. He's an athletic guy that can spin it. He played at St. Francis in Baltimore. It's a tremendous football program coming up. So he's used to competition. Then he plays SEC competition, stays in the SEC, and you're keeping him happy. Can a school like Wisconsin do that? Can a school like Indiana do that? Do they get does Indiana get somebody besides Mendoza? Who does Florida State get in addition to Thomas Castellanos? You've got to have quarterbacks in line. And to that end, some of the offensive linemen, this is something we've talked about a ton here on Locked On Seminoles. Does Florida State, beyond the four guys they already have along the offensive line, do they have guys that are willing to come in and not necessarily start this year, but at least compete, get better, know the system, and then in 26 or 27 can be starters? Finding guys that are really good, that are willing to wait. To me, that is the biggest thing winning in the portal at quarterback and O-line. Those spots are hard to find a lot of guys anyway. That is winning in the transfer portal. So, for instance, it's great that Texas Tech went out and got Romello Height from Georgia Tech. He's a heck of a defensive end. He's a good player. They got Lee Hunter from UCF. He's a run stuffer, good guy. I remember covering him at UCF. Really good player, but he's got a year. Both those guys got like 1 year. They also got Terrence Carter, somebody Florida State wanted. The H-back, who's a lot like Jaheim was for Florida State in 23. Killed people. He's like that. But are they going to get enough guys behind the studs? And I don't know Texas Tech's whole roster like I do Florida State's or LSU's, et cetera. But are you getting balance, and are you going to buy into what Florida State did? They took too many one-year guys, and then they missed on a few guys in 24, and then it snowballed, and then it just – you can have a good portal class, and it look good for a year, but then you can look like mud the next season. Got to have some balance behind that. So here are the overall things that I want to talk about again, as I brought up early in the show. Meeting your needs, impact players. Are you keeping your guys with NIL and adding guys with NIL and it meshes? Not any one of the three, not just two of the three. It's got to be all of them. You got to be able to spend NIL to get the really good guys. Keep your own guys with NIL, and they can't be mad at each other in the locker room. Incredibly difficult, especially with college athletes. The age is a problem. You got too many, as I like to use the term, third uncles making opinions and why guys get in the portal. In short, idiots telling these young men they should or shouldn't leave a school or ask for more money. Third uncle, leave them alone. Okay, I've brought this up many times. Pittsburgh has dumped a bunch of guys last season and it helped their program. They spent less on some of these guys that wanted it, and they had a better season in 24 than they did 23. They were much better, even with a really young quarterback. Locker room, NIL problems, they got to go. Florida State failed at that, and I think some people kind of saw that, Pittsburgh included. Goodbye. So Michael Van Buren is an example. He must be a pretty good team guy because he would start at most schools. Maybe he took a little less if he goes to another school, but he wanted to play in the SEC at LSU. I respect that. He wants to compete. He's behind Nussmeier, but he's going to be learning, and he's going to be in a good system, obviously. LSU's got skill talent. LSU and him, that sounds like a fit. That's a guy I'm going to watch down the road, and I respect it. How many other schools, maybe Florida State finds somebody that does that with Castellanos? I have no idea. But how many other schools can blend like that? This is a really unique scenario with all these different guys coming into different programs. You can't just win with the 1 year wonders every year. You got to get guys from the portal to win long term, to truly win the portal, that have multiple years, and some of them not necessarily being the front runner, being the top guy that ESPN Sports Center talks about. The teams that do that will be the teams that win long term and not just have a really good year and then all of a sudden, wow, the bottom drops out. I think Florida State has learned from this. Indiana's kind of the anomaly out of the teams I talked about. I think LSU's learned a little bit too. They've had some quarterback attrition, but they get Van Buren. Obviously, that helps. They saw what they had to do better at the high school ranks. They had a really good class, but they supplemented it with the portal. That's a good blend. LSU probably got a chance to make the playoff next year. Pretty good one at that. Team like Texas Tech might too, but I'm still a little leery because they haven't recruited high school very well in terms of the top-notch guys on the offensive line. They got plenty of numbers. Can they get over that? That's, you got to have a nice balance with high school recruiting. It's harder for Tech. I get it. They've done a really good job there as a staff at getting teams, best players that go into the portal. They've spent money and good for them, but I'm still a little leery once they get – I think Tech has a great chance to make the playoff next year. They might get annihilated by somebody. I just don't think they're going to be able to run the ball and win in the trenches enough. Again, you still got to get high school players that are elite, especially quarterback, offensive line, because it takes longer to develop in your system as a rule. What LSU's doing is kind of new, and I hope that some more teams could do it. But quarterback, O-line, if you're not recruiting those guys out of the portal or out of the high school ranks, well, it's going to be hard. Same with D-line. I doubt Tech can do that for very long, but it would be a cool story if they can make it. Team like Wisconsin, 6-6 is where I see that program. 8-4 would be, until otherwise proven, about the best that program is going to do over the next decade, because they're not spending on the outs. Did they meet their needs? No. They did get a good quarterback, but is he great? Did they get enough speed overall? No, because they don't have enough talent at receiver. You got to meet your needs, and you still got to blend with the high school ranks. A lot of these teams aren't doing it quite to what their ranking says, because at the end of the day, it's nice to have a good portal class, but is it going to blend with everything else? FSU, I think, is finally one of the best teams in the country at doing that. They've completely shifted. LSU's trending in that direction too. And these are programs that a lot of people, for good reason, were mad at this year, and they're turning it around. We'll see if somebody like Indiana or Texas Tech or Wisconsin surprises me. I still have my questions because the high school ranks and being consistent with the NIL and everything is not quite there yet. We'll see. I plan on doing some more of these and using some other comparisons after we get a few more weeks into the portal, once we get some of the teams from say the college football playoff teams, more of them out. Let's see who else jumps in the portal from Notre Dame or Penn State or Texas or Clemson, whatever it is that will impact rosters. But again, portal's fun, but you got to blend it really, really well. This has been Brian Smith with Locked On Seminoles. You can find me on X at FBScout_Florida. Everybody have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon.